You know what's funny about being a military intelligence officer? Nobody ever believes you when you're the first one to spot the alien invasion fleet. Trust me, I would know. I spent 3 hours trying to convince my superiors that those weren't weather balloons or satellite glitches on our deep space monitoring systems, but nope, apparently Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Chen was just being paranoid again. Well, guess who was laughing when a massive crystalline ship materialized over the UN headquarters? Not me, actually. I was too busy saying "I told you so" to everyone who'd ignored my reports. The Zx'thraxians, as they called themselves, were exactly what you'd expect from a supposedly superior alien race. Tall, imposing, with iridescent exoskeletons that shifted colors like an oil slick in sunlight. Their leader, High Commander Zexthians, appeared on every screen worldwide in what they probably thought was an impressive display of technological prowess. Personally, I found it about as impressive as a teenager hijacking the Times Square billboards. "Humans," Zexthians announced, mandibles clicking in what I assumed was their version of smug superiority. "Your primitive species has been chosen for the honor of serving the Zex'thraxian Empire. Resistance is futile as your pathetic weapons cannot penetrate our quantum crystalline shields." The UN Security Council was having an emergency meeting, and guess who they finally decided to call? That's right, the paranoid Lieutenant Colonel who'd been warning them about this exact scenario. I sat there, sipping my coffee, while world leaders panicked about our new would-be overlords. "With all due respect, Madam Secretary," I said, putting down my coffee mug that read, "World's okayest intelligence officer, but has anyone else noticed these aliens are trying way too hard?" The room fell silent. I continued, "Look at their ship design. It's all crystal and sharp angles. It's like they raided a cosmic jewelry store. And their name? Zx'thraxians. Sounds like something from a B-movie script." "Lieutenant Colonel Chen," the Secretary General frowned, "this is hardly the time for—" "Oh, it's exactly the time," I interrupted, pulling up my analysis on the main screen. "They've been broadcasting their demands for 6 hours straight, but look at their ship's positioning. They're maintaining the exact same altitude and orientation. They haven't adjusted for Earth's rotation or atmospheric conditions. Either they're incredibly skilled at staying perfectly still, which, by the way, is a massive waste of energy, or—" "Or what?" someone asked. "Or they're so convinced of their superiority that they didn't bother to account for a Class 3 planet's basic physical properties." I grinned. And if there's one thing I've learned in military intelligence, it's that superiority complexes make for excellent blind spots. The Zx'thraxians continued their broadcasts, each one more grandiose than the last. They detailed how they'd conquered 17 star systems, how their technology was millennia ahead of ours, how their society had achieved perfect order through rigid hierarchy and absolute conformity. That last part really caught my attention. Perfect order through conformity. Now that was interesting. "Send them our response," the Secretary General finally ordered after hours of debate. I couldn't help but smirk as our carefully worded message of surrender was transmitted. The Zx'thraxians would probably take it as submission. They'd likely miss the subtle sarcasm, the carefully placed ambiguities, and most importantly, the fact that humans are really good at malicious compliance. As I walked out of the UN building that evening, watching that crystalline ship gleaming in the sunset, I couldn't help but think about how the Zx'thraxians had made the classic mistake of assuming technological superiority equals absolute superiority. They'd somehow missed the fact that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our nukes or our tanks. It's our ability to look at something impossibly advanced, impossibly powerful, and still think, yeah, but what if we tried being really annoying about this? The invasion was about to get interesting, very interesting indeed. Turns out watching aliens try to establish control over Earth is surprisingly similar to watching a corporate merger go wrong. Within the first week of our surrender, the Zx'thraxians had already sent down their first wave of administrators, each one equipped with what they assured us was cutting-edge management technology. The first crack in their perfect facade appeared during what they called a standard planetary acquisition meeting in Singapore. Their regional overseer, Sub-Commander X, started malfunctioning halfway through their speech about efficiency protocols. At first, we thought it was some kind of tactical ploy. Nope. Turns out their exoskeletons couldn't handle humidity above 80%. "Sir," I reported to the Joint Chiefs, trying to keep a straight face, "our invincible alien overlords appear to be susceptible to frizz." The Zx'thraxians had set up their main Earth headquarters in the middle of the Sahara Desert, claiming the location was optimally positioned for planetary control. None of us had the heart to tell them about sandstorms. We did, however, start a betting pool on how long their crystalline technology would last against fine-grained sand. I won $50 when their primary communication array started making sounds like a poorly maintained coffee grinder after just 3 days. The resistance didn't so much organize as it evolved naturally from humanity's collective realization that our conquerors were, to put it diplomatically, working with some serious limitations. A network of observers began documenting every alien quirk and weakness we could find. My inbox was flooded with reports from around the globe. Zexthraxian patrol, unable to pursue suspect through revolving door, spent 3 hours attempting to calculate optimal entry timing. Alien administrator, confused by vending machine, attempted to negotiate terms of exchange with it for 45 minutes. Entire Zx'thraxian unit defeated by automatic sliding doors at shopping mall. Claimed doors possessed primitive but effective force field technology. But my favorite report came from a small town in Minnesota. The aliens had attempted to set up a local control center, only to discover they couldn't handle winter. Their high-tech heating systems, designed for the vacuum of space, proved completely inadequate against the simple challenge of wind chill. The sight of proud Zx'thraxian warriors shuffling around in human-made parkas, complaining about something called thermal inefficiency, was worth every second of invasion. Their rigid hierarchy proved to be their biggest weakness. Every decision, no matter how small, had to go through exactly 17 levels of approval. A Zx'thraxian soldier once spent 2 full days standing in the rain because their relief orders hadn't been stamped with the correct fluorescent authorization sigil. We tested this one day in New Delhi. The resistance orchestrated what we called Operation Traffic Light. We simply reprogrammed a traffic signal to change colors in an irregular pattern. The alien patrol station there sent increasingly desperate requests up their chain of command, trying to determine the correct protocol for handling this deviation from standard traffic flow algorithms. By hour 6, they had declared the intersection a chaos zone and requested reinforcements. By hour 12, 3 different administrative divisions were arguing over jurisdiction. By hour 24, they had constructed a temporary base of operations to study this primitive but enigmatic human control system. The traffic light burned out 2 days later, and they wrote a 500-page report about human infrastructure's strategic unreliability. But the real entertainment started when they tried to implement their standardized planetary education system. They set up their first test school in Brazil, confident that their superior teaching methods would revolutionize human learning. They lasted exactly 1 day before a class of kindergartners reduced their lead educator to what their medical staff described as acute behavioral uncertainty. The breaking point, the kids kept asking why. "Your species' young appear to have a dangerous fixation with causality," one traumatized alien instructor reported. "They demonstrate a concerning resistance to accepting answers without explanation." Meanwhile, our actual resistance was growing more sophisticated. We discovered that the Zx'thraxians couldn't process certain human concepts. Sarcasm went right over their heads. They had no concept of fiction. They spent 3 weeks analyzing human literature before declaring Shakespeare a defective historical database. But the real goldmine, memes. Their advanced AI systems would spend countless hours trying to decode the strategic significance of pictures of cats with misspelled captions. One particularly effective resistance cell in Tokyo managed to crash an entire alien surveillance network by flooding it with lolcat images. My personal contribution to the resistance effort was discovering that their supposedly advanced translation systems couldn't handle human idioms. I spent a delightful afternoon watching a group of alien anthropologists try to understand why humans would want to beat around the bush or kick the bucket. They eventually concluded that humans must have an obsession with vegetation-based violence and bucket-related aggression. The Zx'thraxians responded to each new challenge with increasingly complex protocols and regulations. Their response to discovering that humans sometimes said one thing but meant another, a 200-page manual on human verbal paradox resolution procedures, their solution to finding out that weather could change unexpectedly, a committee dedicated to filing complaints against Earth's atmosphere for unscheduled meteorological variations. By month 3 of the invasion, we had compiled enough evidence to confirm our initial suspicion. The Zx'thraxians weren't actually superior beings. They were just incredibly specialized space bureaucrats who had never encountered a species that didn't fit neatly into their pre-existing conquest templates. And humanity, we were the equivalent of throwing a rubber duck into perfectly calculated machine. We didn't break any of their rules, we just existed in ways their rules never accounted for. As I updated my ever-growing database of alien weaknesses, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our military might. It was our ability to be absolutely, infuriatingly unpredictable. And we were just getting started. Month 4 of the invasion marked what I like to call the Great Paper Jam. Some genius in the resistance figured out that the Zx'thraxians required physical copies of all reports. In triplicate, naturally. Their entire command structure depended on these documents being filed in exactly the right order, at exactly the right time, with exactly the right color-coded tabs. So we started filing complaints, all of us, about everything. Form ZX1123B7, complaint about the color of alien uniforms clashing with Earth's seasonal aesthetics. Form ZX4891D2, protest against anti-gravitational devices violating local height restrictions. Form ZX7756H9, formal request to consider the emotional well-being of local squirrels disturbed by spacecraft landing procedures. Their bureaucracy wasn't just overwhelmed, it was drowning in paperwork. The best part, according to their own regulations, they had to process every single complaint. Meanwhile, our social media warfare reached new heights. We discovered that their monitoring AI was required to analyze every single post that might contain strategic information. So what did we do? We turned them into conspiracy theories. Aliens secretly can't handle spicy food. The spice must flow. Zx'thraxians are just cats in robot suits. A thread, 1457th. Proof that our alien overlords run on Windows Vista. Their analysis systems crashed 3 times trying to determine if humans had actually discovered their classified weaknesses or were just being, well, human. But my proudest moment came when we introduced them to modern art. Picture this, a warehouse-sized alien data center filled with the most advanced pattern recognition systems in the galaxy, trying to decode the strategic significance of a banana duct taped to a wall. They spent 2 weeks analyzing it before declaring Earth's cultural artifacts weaponized incomprehensibility. The Zx'thraxians' frustration became increasingly evident. High Commander Vexithor's mandibles would twitch violently during every public announcement. Their perfectly maintained formation lines started showing signs of stress fractures. One alien officer was caught stress-shedding their exoskeleton during a particularly chaotic Earth Day celebration. We exploited Earth's environment mercilessly. When they set up bases in the Arctic, we waited for the aurora borealis to disrupt their sensors. In the Amazon, we introduced them to the concept of flash floods and poison dart frogs. One resistance cell in Australia simply let nature do its thing. Turns out even advanced alien species are not prepared for encounters with platypuses. Their attempts to maintain control became increasingly desperate. They tried implementing a standardized global temperature control system. It failed spectacularly when they discovered the concept of microclimates. They attempted to regulate Earth's wildlife, only to face the impossible task of cataloging every species, including the ones we hadn't discovered yet. The breaking point came during what became known as the global potluck incident. In an attempt to understand human culture better, the Zx'thraxians organized mandatory cultural exchange meals. They didn't account for the fact that human cuisine is basically a history of our species asking, what happens if we eat this? The resulting chaos as alien digestive systems encountered wasabi, ghost peppers and fermented fish sauce was only matched by their horror at discovering that humans actually enjoyed these things. Their medical staff filed an emergency petition to classify Earth's entire food culture as a biological weapon. By month 6, the Zx'thraxians had developed a nervous tic whenever they heard the phrase, "But that's how we've always done it." Their once pristine ships now bore the marks of what they termed environmental contamination, which was really just mud, pollen, and occasionally the results of seagull bombing runs. But perhaps the most devastating blow to their morale was the day we introduced them to customer service hold music. Their communications officers couldn't comprehend why humans would voluntarily subject themselves to repetitive musical patterns while waiting for assistance. They tried to optimize the system, only to discover that humans had turned being on hold into an art form of passive-aggressive patience. Looking at my latest intelligence reports, I couldn't help but grin. The Zx'thraxians had arrived expecting to find primitive beings ready for subjugation. Instead, they found a species that had turned chaos into a lifestyle, unpredictability into a weapon, and bureaucratic malicious compliance into a martial art. As I watched another alien administrator rush past my office, clutching a stack of complaint forms while muttering something about impossible species variations, I realized we were approaching a tipping point. The Zx'thraxians were facing something their advanced civilization had never encountered before, a species that couldn't be standardized, wouldn't be optimized, and treated their carefully constructed protocols as friendly suggestions at best. The question wasn't if they would break, it was when, and judging by the sound of yet another alien printer exploding in the distance, that when was coming soon. The battle that changed everything started because of a butterfly, literally. Some bright spark in the resistance noticed that the Zx'thraxians' prediction algorithms couldn't handle chaos theory. So naturally we weaponized it. Operation Butterfly Effect began on a Tuesday. We released exactly 10,000 butterflies in Rio de Janeiro, right as the Zx'thraxians were conducting their quarterly planetary assessment. Their sensors went haywire trying to track the suspicious airborne biological agents, but that wasn't the real plan. The butterflies were just the catalyst. The real show started when their tracking systems tried to compensate for the unpredictable flight patterns. Each adjustment triggered a cascade of automated responses across their global network. Their whole system was based on perfect prediction and control, and now it was trying to calculate the uncalculable. "Sir," my assistant burst into my office, "you need to see this." On my screens, I watched as the Zx'thraxian command structure began to unravel. Their ships, programmed to maintain perfect geometric formations, started shifting erratically as their positioning systems attempted to account for every possible butterfly trajectory. High Commander Vexithor appeared on global broadcasts, mandibles practically vibrating with rage. "This unprovoked act of meteorological terrorism will not stand." I leaned back in my chair. "They think we're controlling the weather." That's when we implemented Phase 2. Every human device, from smartphones to weather stations, started broadcasting completely random but technically accurate atmospheric data. The Zx'thraxians' rigid protocols required them to verify and respond to all environmental changes. Their ships, struggling to adjust to what they thought were rapidly shifting atmospheric conditions, began fighting against Earth's actual gravity and atmosphere. The sight of their crystalline fleet wobbling in the sky like a bunch of drunken disco balls would have been comical if it wasn't so brilliantly effective. "Status report," I called out to our monitoring team. "Their primary fleet is down 40% efficiency due to gravitational compensation errors," someone shouted back. "They're burning through power trying to stabilize against weather patterns that don't exist." But the real revelation came from an intercepted transmission between Vexithor and their homeworld. As their systems crashed around them, we finally understood the true nature of Zx'thraxian society. They weren't just bureaucratic, they were symbiotic with their protocols. Their entire civilization functioned like a massive computer program, with each individual serving as a subroutine. And we had just introduced a bug they couldn't patch. The Zx'thraxians deployed their ground forces, probably hoping to establish some kind of order. Big mistake. Earth's varied terrain proved to be their ultimate nightmare. Their troops, used to standardized environments, found themselves facing mountains, swamps, deserts, sometimes all in the same country. "Target their command protocols," I ordered. "Full spectrum chaos." Resistance cells worldwide launched our coordinated attack, but we weren't using weapons. We were using pure, weapons-grade randomness. Flash mobs in Tokyo, impromptu parades in Mexico City, a massive game of musical chairs in Times Square. Each seemingly meaningless event forced their systems to analyze, categorize, and respond. Their rigid hierarchy began to splinter. Lower-ranked Zx'thraxians, unable to receive clear instructions through the chaos, started making unprecedented, independent decisions. Some even began asking questions, a serious taboo in their society. The breaking point came when a junior alien officer, frustrated by conflicting orders, did the unthinkable. They improvised. The shockwave of this procedural violation rippled through their entire command structure. It was like watching a perfect crystal shatter from a single flaw. "Sir," someone called out, "their ships are starting to move." We watched as the once mighty Zx'thraxian fleet began a hasty ascent, not a retreat. They were too rigid for that. Instead, they called it a strategic atmospheric reallocation pending complete protocol review. But before they left, High Commander Vexathor made one final broadcast. Their usually impeccable appearance was noticeably disheveled, their crystalline armor showing stress fractures. "Humanity," they announced, mandibles twitching, "your planet has been classified as a Class X anomaly zone. All further contact is suspended pending the development of new standardization procedures. We estimate this will take approximately 40,000 of your Earth years." As their ships disappeared into the upper atmosphere, I pulled out my world's okayest intelligence officer mug, now sporting a few alien crystal shards as decoration. "Did we just save Earth with chaos theory and interpretive dance?" my assistant asked. "No," I replied, sipping my coffee. "We just proved that humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to build order from chaos, it's our ability to function despite it." The last Zx'thraxian ship vanished from our sensors, leaving behind mountains of partially completed paperwork, several confused alien middle managers, and one very important lesson. Never try to standardize a species that turned unpredictability into an art form. The final confrontation wasn't exactly the epic space battle everyone expected. Instead, it started with a weather forecast and ended with what can only be described as the galaxy's biggest corporate meltdown. 3 days after Operation Butterfly Effect, the Zx'thraxian High Command made their last desperate attempt to restore order. They launched what they called Protocol Omega, a complete planetary standardization program. Too bad they picked monsoon season in Southeast Asia to try it. "They're attempting to control Earth's weather," my deputy announced, watching as massive alien machines descended through the atmosphere. "Well," I replied, "let's give them some weather to control." We'd prepared for this. Every weather station on Earth began broadcasting real data, completely accurate and totally chaotic. Monsoons in Asia, hurricanes in the Atlantic, tornadoes in the Midwest, and just for fun, a particularly energetic dust devil in Arizona. The Zx'thraxian weather control systems tried to compensate for everything simultaneously. Their machines, designed to create perfect atmospheric conditions, faced the impossible task of standardizing a planet that had spent billions of years perfecting the art of meteorological chaos. "Sir," a technician called out, "their primary weather control hub is attempting to process multiple contradicting wind patterns." "Send them the data from that little storm brewing off the coast of Florida," I ordered with a grin. "You mean Hurricane Bob?" "The very same." The aliens' machines went into overdrive trying to suppress a Category 4 hurricane while simultaneously attempting to maintain their standardized atmospheric protocols. The result? Their weather control network experienced what we later termed a catastrophic logic cascade. Meanwhile, the remnants of their ground forces faced a different kind of chaos. We launched Operation Hot Sauce, literally just humans eating increasingly spicy foods near their environmental sensors. Their atmospheric monitoring systems couldn't distinguish between chemical weapons and someone enjoying a ghost pepper challenge. The Zx'thraxian command structure finally imploded when their supreme logistics coordinator encountered a contradiction in their prime directive. They were required to maintain perfect order, but their attempts to create order were causing unprecedented chaos. The cognitive dissonance proved too much for their rigid minds. We intercepted their final internal broadcast. "Error, reality does not conform to approved parameters. Initiative 957X, total reality compliance has failed. Initiating emergency protocol, error 404, order not found." That's when things got really interesting. The lower-ranked Zx'thraxians, watching their leadership corps suffer what appeared to be an existential blue screen of death, started doing something unprecedented. They began asking questions. Why do we need to standardize everything? Is chaos really that bad? Has anyone actually read all these protocols? The final blow came from an unexpected source, a junior Zx'thraxian weather technician, having spent weeks studying Earth's atmospheric patterns, made a discovery. Chaos wasn't the opposite of order. It was a different kind of order. Their report, titled Preliminary Observations on Functional Disorder, a study of human organizational patterns, spread through their ranks like a virus. High Commander Zx'thraxians made one last attempt to restore control. They initiated their civilization's ultimate weapon, the Grand Standardization Wave. It was supposed to impose perfect order on everything it touched. We countered with cats, millions of them. Every cat video, cat meme, and cat photo humanity had ever created, broadcast directly into their data networks. Their wave-generating machines attempted to standardize the behavior of Earth's most chaotic house pets. The resulting system crash was spectacular. Their machines, unable to compute the fundamental nature of feline unpredictability, underwent what their engineers termed catastrophic logical rejection. As their fleet hung motionless in the sky, paralyzed by the complete breakdown of their command structure, I received a message from an unexpected source. The Zx'thraxian Committee for Procedural Oversight had reached a conclusion. Earth was to be classified as a natural chaos preserve, too valuable to standardize. Observation, their final report stated, humans appear to have mastered the art of weaponized randomness. Further attempts at standardization deemed hazardous to organizational health. Recommendation, retreat and reclassify humans as chaos-adapted sentients, approach with extreme caution. The sight of their mighty fleet now retreating in what they termed an orderly fashion, but looked more like a panicked scramble, was something I'll never forget. They left behind only a small delegation of their most adaptable members, those who had learned to embrace a little chaos, as diplomatic observers. Victory through unprecedented tactics, more like victory through being utterly, uniquely, and proudly human. The real irony? After driving off the galaxy's most bureaucratic species, with our chaos, humanity turned right around and became the universe's new administrators. But with style. 6 months after the Zx'thraxian retreat, I found myself heading the newly established Earth Office of Galactic Standards. Turns out, we'd inherited all their technology, their interstellar networks, and most entertainingly, their position as Galaxy's regulatory body. The first thing we did was rewrite the rulebook, literally. We took their 14 million-page manual of galactic standards and condensed it into a single page. It read, Rule 1, don't be a jerk. Rule 2, see Rule 1. Rule 3, when in doubt, improvise. Our first act as humanity's representative to the galactic community, we classified bureaucracy as a controlled substance, only to be used in moderation and with proper safety equipment. We kept some of the Zx'thraxian technology, of course. Their faster-than-light drives were impressive, even if they did come with a 500-page user manual. We simplified that too. Point at destination, push big button, hold on to something. The remaining Zx'thraxian observers watched in horror as we systematically optimized their systems. We introduced concepts like good enough, we'll figure it out as we go, and the revolutionary idea that sometimes chaos is the solution. Now, 10 years later, Earth has become the galaxy's go-to problem solver. Need to file an interstellar trade agreement? Our office will handle it. Probably over coffee, possibly involving a karaoke contest. Have a diplomatic crisis? We'll sort it out. Our methods may involve memes, but they work. And the best part? The few Zx'thraxians who stayed behind have developed a sense of humor. Last week, one of them filed a complaint about their complaint filing system being too efficient. I'm pretty sure it was a joke, mostly sure. We're still working on understanding their comedy. As for me, I got promoted to Chief of Unconventional Solutions, which mostly involves explaining to other species that yes, this is how we actually do things, and no, we're not making it up as we go along. We totally are. My old world's okayest intelligence officer mug now sits in the Galactic Museum of Revolutionary Objects, right next to the first butterfly that started it all. Not the actual butterfly, obviously. We just put an empty display case there because we thought it was funny. The universe, it turns out, needed a little chaos. It needed a species that could look at perfect order and say, yeah, but what if we didn't? A species that could take the most advanced alien bureaucracy in existence and defeat it with cat videos and paperwork. They wanted to enslave humanity and impose their perfect order. Instead, we became the galaxy's chaos consultants, the managers of managed chaos, the bureaucrats who bureaucracy-ed the bureaucrats. And you know what? The galaxy runs better now. Sure, it's a bit messier, a bit more unpredictable, but it's also more alive, more adaptable, more human. As I look out my office window at the Earth's new spaceport, watching ships from 100 worlds navigate our intentionally irregular traffic patterns, I can't help but smile. We didn't just resist standardization, we standardized resistance itself. And somewhere out there, I like to think there's a butterfly flapping its wings, causing a chain reaction that will lead to yet another perfectly chaotic day in humanity's gloriously disorganized galactic empire.